Hello and welcome to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan. Matt had a busy week last week. Not so much news action coming up this week or in the previous week, but last week we talked a little bit of alignment possibilities as well as there was a couple of trades last week we talked, so we'll get into a little bit of that as well as the trade deadline coming up. But I know one of the things you mentioned you wanted to talk to right off the start here was three-point games and some of the things, maybe why they're not so beneficial in the NHL and why they kind of skew the standings a little bit.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. I mean, a little bit about realignment was one thing we talked about. That's one change that we could be seeing. If there were some other changes that I might like to see, get rid of the three-point game. I've never been a big fan of it. It kind of makes it a vanilla race at the end. It gets kind of boring where, you got teams chasing teams, looking above them in the standings, and teams are getting 1 point in OT, or if you beat a team you're chasing even and you only get that 1 point gain on them for a win, it seems a little bit unfair. I mean, you can look at the standings right now. You've got Montreal sitting on the top of the standings right now. Overall record is 14 wins and 9 losses realistically, but because they've got 4 losses in OT, they are sitting at 32 points, as opposed to Toronto, who's 14 and 9, no OT losses, sitting in 5th place. So to me, the three-point game, that 1 point for overtime, it's kind of like a participation ribbon. It's, thanks for trying, you managed to get to overtime, good for you. But realistically, it's the only league that awards teams for losing. You look at the NFL, you win or you lose. You can tie, it's very rare. MLB will play 20 innings until the game is decided and there's a winner. NBA will do the same thing. They'll play 4, 5, 6 OT periods until a winner's decided. So if there's a way that they can do that, I don't have anything against the shootout. You can keep that in. If not, change up the point structure where maybe a regulation win is worth 3 points. I don't know, but I really don't like that three-point game where a winner gets 2 and a loser gets 1. I'd rather see a clear-cut winner have an advantage for winning a game as opposed to just 1 point.
No, I'm the same way. I mean, we'll agree on a few things, we'll disagree on a few things, but I know definitely that the three-point game is something I don't really like. I mean, I like the shootout. I like the 5-minute overtime 4-on-4 and then leading into the shootout to get a winner for sure. But the three-point game, it's the same thing. I mean, you'll see the odd overtime goal, but other than that, most of the times it's just they wait until shootout, whatever happens in the shootout happens, and then it's just debated on 1 point. So like you said in the standings, it does kind of skew things, I think, a little bit. As you mentioned, the Leafs, who are sitting in 5th with technically the same amount of wins and losses as the Habs, but the Habs with the extra 4 points because they're 4 overtime losses. So I'm kind of the same way. And then in the West, look at Chicago right now with the record that they've had. Everyone talks, they haven't lost in regulation, which is good. I mean, that's impressive.
You can't take anything from that, no.
But they've still got 3 losses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've still lost 3 games. They lost, I'm almost positive they lost 1 in overtime. Like, they got scored on and lost the game. So they still weren't the best team on the ice that night. So, I mean, it's still an impressive record, obviously, 20-0-3. You see that big O in the
Yeah, you can't discount that. But realistically, if you get rid of that OT loss, right? They've got 3 losses.
3 times
they have lost
they were the
3
worst
games.
team on the ice, yeah.
But they've been awarded 3 points, and they've got, I think it's 43 of a possible 46 points.
Yeah, which is pretty impressive.
Realistically, it should only be 40 of 46. It's still a very impressive record. And another thing that I noticed is when you get down to crunch time, playoff time, it does kind of make the game a little slow and boring when teams know that they're being chased or they're tight, and they're going to say, you get a lot of third periods where it's a tie game, and you got a couple teams in a playoff race saying, you know what, let's not do anything dumb, let's slow it down, let's just try to play, get to overtime, get that 1 point so we don't, blow up a lead that we have on some other teams in the standings. And then you get a little bit of teams sitting back, playing trapping, it gets boring. So, maybe make 3 points for a regulation loss, or regulation win, if you're going to give that 1 overtime point, and then maybe 2 points in the OT, something like that, change it up, Make teams want to get that extra point in regulation, win the game in regulation, rather than sitting back and playing not to lose rather than playing to win. I'd rather see teams playing to win, earn those points, rather than sit back and kind of say, we'll rest on our laurels, we'll take the 1 point, and then whatever happens from there happens, right? We're not losing too much if we lose, but we're not gaining a huge amount if we win.
Yeah, especially down the stretch at the end of the third period, right? Final 5 minutes or so. If the game's tied, not very often do you actually see a goal scored in the last 5 minutes and a team win it in regulation. Even if they're playing someone in their own conference, where it will make that extra point difference, right? If they win 2-0 versus 2-1. So that thing like that, injuries have kind of been a problem this year. We've seen a few, definitely some big injuries to a couple of teams, especially Canadian team in Ottawa. I mean, they were down 3 of their 3 best players, and some of the things like that, I know in the past has been the no-touch icing. They've always talked about that, about whether to have it, whether to not have it, go to what we have in minor hockey with just once the puck gets past the goal line, blow it down and take it back for icing. But in the NHL, one thing that I like that I've seen lots of people hate is I like to see the races, actually. I know, yeah, guys get injured, and you obviously don't want guys injured, but I like the races. I mean, I think, they're in the NHL, they're professional athletes. I mean, yeah, the races, you don't want to get hurt, break a leg or whatever. We've seen that in the past, but for me personally, I like the icing the way it is in the NHL. For the minor hockey here for us, leave it the way it is. Prevent injuries, especially for young kids, young ages and stuff. But in the NHL, I know one thing that I definitely like is that the icing and the way it is now, having to race back. I like the races. They're exciting. They're, sometimes the ref blow the call even, but I like to see it.
I'm kind of with you. I mean, it would kind of change the integrity of the game a little bit because, as you said, the no-touch icing is really a minor hockey type of thing. It's something you don't see too often in any kind of professional leagues. I'm not sure, do they do a no-touch icing in Europe, in the KHL or leagues like that?
I think it is actually. I think it's a no-touch icing.
They play a no-touch. It's different. I mean, it's a bigger ice surface, so it might be just more according to the game style. But I mean, a lot of the complaint that people have, what I hear, is that it's going to slow down the game. You're going to have too many whistles rather than those 50-50 puck battles that, as you said, those races where, an offensive team can kind of win a dump and chase race, keep the play alive, and people are worried that, it's going to take away from forecheck. Teams aren't going to be able to maintain a forecheck if they can't, dump it in from behind center and then win a race. If you say you've got a slow defenseman
you rarely
out there,
do see it though, right?
Catch a slow defenseman napping and kind of dump one in from your own blue line and beat him down there. People are kind of concerned about, it's going to slow the game down. You guys are going to be bogging down in the neutral zone because you can't throw the puck in. Anytime you throw it in, it's just automatic whistle. But you look at games like in the World Junior, which is great hockey, and they play with no-touch icing in World Junior hockey. And, I mean, you don't notice it really affecting the game in that level, and that's high-level hockey. So tough to say if the NHL would do it. If it, it's something. It's one of those things that kind of comes up really sporadically, and it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction a lot of time. If you see a couple of guys in the span of a week get injured on an icing where guys are racing for the puck and a guy goes down, shatters an ankle or something like that, kind of the same thing as how a couple of years ago there was a lot of high sticking and eye injuries were happening, and people were saying, oh, they should make visors mandatory. That was another thing that kind of happened. So whether or not it is something that actually gets changed or gets discussed again, I'm not sure. I don't think I'd be too adverse to it. Maybe try it out in an exhibition game or two, try it out in the preseason and see how the players react to it. But it's something that has to be kind of bounced around between ownership and the players, whether or not they're going to want to play with those rules.
Yeah, and I mean, well, we won't see it here probably in the future. It might take a little while, and like you said, a week span of maybe, seeing a few injuries and then seeing, it being talked about more through the media and things like that, and asking players how they like it and things like that. So we'll see. Maybe if that does come into effect, even towards the end of this year, if it is something they think about maybe for next year, I don't think they will. I think Gary Bettman, the commissioners and the owners, I think they like it the way it is. I think they like seeing the races. I like seeing the races as a fan. I mean, that's just me personally. Another thing is, video review. We talked about it in the past. We've seen it, come into leagues like the MLB now looking at it. They're very rarely using it, for home runs over the foul pole and things like that, which is nice to see. I mean, it could be another thing that comes into the NHL, on a goal. We've seen it a few times, where the guy goes crossbar down, it sits on the inside of the ice, and the way it comes down, it bounces out, and they don't call it a goal because the ref misses it, right? Whether he's on the side of the circle coming into the zone, he's a little bit delayed. Sometimes they miss one. I mean, there's been a few that go to the inside of the net and things like that, but I don't know. For as far as video review, I would like to see it maybe put in, not for, judgment of refs or anything and penalties and stuff, but I would maybe like to see video review come effect maybe next year.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier when that horrible offside call with Matt Duchene against, or non-offside call, I guess you would call it. It was a call that didn't happen. It's something that it's kind of at the discretion of league officials, really. It's, as I said, I think it feels like you undermine refs when you put it in there and say, what, we don't like the job you're doing. We're going to have a camera watching the game just in case you screw up. So it is a little bit of a shot at the refs. You have to have a little bit of human error. But as you said, it's kind of give and take for stuff like that, for calls like that, or even as you said, where we're talking about the no-touch icing. When you see perhaps a play where two guys are racing for the puck, ref blows it, screws up, doesn't realize that it was actually the defenseman that touched it first. They let the forwards control the puck, take it in, they score. The defenseman says, hey, no, I was first to that puck. I know it for a fact I touched it first. Ref can go back, take a quick look at it, say, okay, you know what, you're right. That's an icing call. It goes back the other way. Whether or not that slows the game down or, kind of messes up the integrity, because you're going to have guys every single play saying, no, I didn't do this, or yes, I did this. You don't really want to slow it down and have instant replays and video reviews every play, but for certain plays, like you said, like the Duchene one, you gotta correct that. You can't have things like that happening.
The other thing is that you mentioned the icing. If the defenseman says, I touched it, how long do they let play go? Like, what happens if they play 3-4 minutes? Whereas in the NFL,
it's hard to go
it's
back.
just one play, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just done. So
you can't
can just
rewind
look
the
back
clock
on
or
it.
anything for that long, really.
So it kind of makes it a little bit. That's why I think we just come into play maybe with goals. But other
Only
than
on
that,
scoring plays, really.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be right back though. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schneider alongside Matt Durnan once again. And this week I guess rather, not too much news in the NHL. A few trades. Mike Brown going to the Oilers for a conditional 4th rounder. But other than that, I mean, not too much news injury-wise. Nothing major, nothing huge. So I mean, now's the time. I mean, teams are looking.
Sorry, I'll jump in. There was one little suspension. Zollner check in Philadelphia, but nothing too major. You know, he's not a big name player, and we'll kind of wait and see what happens with Scott Hartnell. He attacked the Rangers bench last night, but I don't think much is going to come of it. There was no stick swinging or anything like that, so I don't think a fine will be late or anything. But yeah, you're right. Not too much big news, really.
So, not too much, and I mean, as now we are about halfway this point through the NHL season. Some teams have played 23 games, some have played 22. With 48, we're just about at half. So I mean, now's the time when teams are the top end teams like Chicago. I mean, obviously they're dominating everyone, but some teams are going to look to make changes to this point. Whether it's coaching changes, teams who are sitting in about the 9th, 10th, looking to get into the playoffs, or teams maybe even look and make a couple of deals and get a couple of players and move up towards the top or up into the top three spots and lead their division. So as far as coaching goes, I know there's a few coaches that are probably on the hot seat now. I mean, there's some teams who are expected to do a little higher than they are. So for you, maybe what are some of the coaches that you think might not see a job here in the next little while?
The first one that I would say, I've heard a little bit about Guy Boucher in Tampa Bay. He's having a little bit of a rough time with that team. There's kind of rumors swirling around that he's kind of lost the room. People aren't really responding to him anymore on that team. They're not listening to him. Tampa Bay not doing too bad. What are they sitting at about? I think they're actually in 3rd right now. I think they're at the
Oh, really? They were sitting in 9th for a while.
They're in a weak division. So in that division, you can go from 9th, 10th to 3rd just by surpassing the team that's in front of you. It's a weak division. So, you know, in another week, they could be sitting in 9th or 10th again. So I've heard Boucher is kind of on the hot seat. Not sure how many years he's been there in Tampa, but, you know, from 2 years ago being in the conference finals and losing out to Boston to last year not even making the playoffs, that's quite a fall off. And then this year they've had a little bit of a hard time with it. John Tortorella's got to be another one for me. He's been
the Rangers.
He's got to be in his 3rd or 4th year now, maybe with New York. Could be less. I could be.
Like he's about 3rd.
I could be overshooting it, but
no, maybe he's only in his 2nd actually, because they did with the half lockout. I think he might only be in his 2nd year. Last year when they did the 24/7 series, I remember watching that. I think that might have been his 1st year back from being. I mean,
he's a few years deep, and I mean the Rangers they're arguably one of the top teams in the East. Not so much this year, you know. With the talent that he's got there, especially that big line of Nash, Richards, and Gaborik, you know, the talent that he's been given to work with, he really hasn't gotten the most out of them so far this year, at least. I mean, Gaborik was pretty good last year with 40-plus goals, but he really hasn't gotten too much out of those guys. I think losing Dubinsky's kind of hurt them this year, but when you see him, you can kind of see it on his face. You know, in the interviews, he kind of doesn't have a lot of patience for it. It looks like he's kind of a coach that's out of answers, really, when he's asked, you know, what do you think about this? He seems like he doesn't have any answers, doesn't have any time. It seems like he just doesn't have a lot of patience for it anymore. And then another one could be Peter Laviolette, been in Philadelphia for quite a while now. They're struggling. They're sitting at about 9th or 10th, I think, as well right now. Played more games still than everybody else. I don't know who made the schedule for Philadelphia, but they're playing hundreds of games. And they're really not what you thought they were. Again, another team that you would have thought would be competing for that Atlantic Division with Pittsburgh and the Rangers, and really haven't shown too much this year. They've kind of been up and down.
Yeah, the Devils have kind of been the surprise out of that division.
Yeah, they've been a lot better than anyone expected, and the Rangers have been kind of weak too. That whole division's been kind of on and off. It's been pretty much a 2-horse race between Pittsburgh and New Jersey for the most part, and then the Rangers and Philly have kind of been afterthoughts. So I would say that, you know, those two coaches of the Rangers and Flyers, Laviolette and Tortorella would kind of be two that could be kind of on the hot seat if that team doesn't start getting into gear pretty soon.
Yeah, especially if they keep sitting around in that 8th seed. It's definitely those two guys, like you mentioned, for sure. Some of the other teams' coaches that I think definitely could go would be over in St. Louis, Ken Hitchcock. I mean, look at the season they had last year. They finished,
Jack Adams last year for Hitchcock Coach of the Year.
He was the Coach of the Year last year. I mean, he had that great team defensively, the top 2 goal tandem in the league by the end with stats. So, I mean, he's got to be on a hot seat. They're sitting in about 8th or 9th. No, maybe they're up to like 6th or 7th now, but
No, I think they're even
they're kind of
farther
floating
down.
around.
Yeah,
they're floating around. So I mean,
disappointing game last night. Blew a 4-1 lead and got blown out by LA. So.
they've looked so on and off. I mean, they've had to call up Jake Allen in net because their goaltending just hasn't been there. I mean, to give them credit, one of their goalies was injured, but Brian Elliott, who's not even he's not even on the team anymore. He's just been cut, sent down to the AHL. I mean, he was the number 1 guy going into the year, and he's basically down in the minors now, buried in the minors. So I mean, Hitchcock, especially if St. Louis doesn't turn this around here and get a couple of wins, get back up to their division. Obviously, playing in the tough division with Chicago.
Well, they had a great
Detroit.
start too, blowing out Detroit early, and I don't know really what's happened with them.
So we'll see if they can get back into it. Things like that. Another one would be Barry Trotz. Maybe a bit of a surprise over in Nashville. I mean, like you had mentioned before the show, he's been there his entire career, or the entire Nashville Predators organization's been there. He's been their coach. So, I mean, he could probably be on the hot seat because last year, the best year that the Predators have ever had. I mean, they had a pretty decent team with Suter now leaving, so the pressure's still up there, but maybe not as much as it was last year. So we'll see what happens with Barry Trotz because they've floated down a bit. If he can get back up, things like that, I mean, he's another one that could be on the hot seat as well.
Well, they're kind of another, it's another guy that's kind of in the same vein as Lindy Ruff, who we just saw get fired this year. Coaches, it is a job where you're hired to be fired. No, you never see too many coaches last, 25, 30 years with one organization. When things start to get stale, the coach is gone. He's the first one that the finger's pointed at. So, maybe it's just a case of Trotz has been there. He's done his time. He's been there. He'll definitely get hired. He's proven that he's a good coach. He's done an incredible job with Nashville, who arguably has never been a top-end talent team. They've never had any bona fide superstars, apart from, you could argue that Shea Weber is a superstar defenseman, but they've never been the team that's been, you look at the roster, go back to the Rangers with a team like, guys like Nash, Gaborik, Brad Richards, and what they're doing, and then Trotz is working with far lesser players, you could argue, and he's had that team in the playoffs almost every year of his career being in Nashville, so could be just the fact that things are getting a little bit stale. He's been there. The team might need to hear a new voice, maybe take a new direction. So I would agree that he is definitely a guy that you could see go, whether he will or not. Remains to be seen. If they don't make the playoffs, maybe that's a guy that they look at the end of the season. I don't think they'll make a mid-season move because I think they've still got a little bit to work on. But the last one that I would mention would probably be Mike Yeo in Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's another guy that's kind of in that Tortorella situation where he was basically gift-wrapped Zach Parise,
right?
Ryan Suter, with the base that they already had, and said, here you go, Nicholas Backstrom, solid goaltender. They got Heater with the clap bombs out there. Mikko Koivu. They've got Devin Setaguchi. They've got a good base of talent right there. Like, why they're not doing a lot better than they are, whether it's the coach, whether the players just haven't been able to gel, not too sure. So, speaking of players gelling, that's another thing that we could be looking at. Some teams might be looking to find some chemistry, maybe find some missing pieces. Who do you think are some guys that might be looked at when trade deadline comes up in another month? Who are some guys that you could see moving? Guys, whether it be going to make a move with a playoff team or guys just trying to offload some salary. Who are some guys that you might see moving?
Well, it's tough to say. I mean, obviously with the shortened season, the trade deadline, it comes a little bit faster, but it also leaves a little bit faster. I mean, it's still, it's only 20-some games in, or 30 games now if it'll come in a couple of weeks here, but so the trade deadline, it's a tough thing to say. I know Ginla's always been one of those guys. I think Shane Doan in Phoenix, maybe. You never know. You could see something like that, especially if Phoenix starts to go down. Maybe he asks to get out. Maybe he wants to move out. He's been with that organization forever.
Two guys that are kind of, two guys that are lifetime players with their organizations and,
could want to get out.
Neither has a cup. Ginla's come close. Doan had a pretty good run last year with Phoenix, was it, right?
Yeah, they got up to the West Final, but I mean,
guys that could be looking to make that last push, maybe,
Phoenix, they don't got the team this year they had last year.
No, but where do they really go, right? I mean,
well, that's the thing.
When you look at the teams that are the realistic competitors, it's always hard to say, I want to go here. I mean, no one's going to say, no, I don't want Jerome McGinley on my team, but realistically, if you're a team like Chicago, Anaheim, Pittsburgh, who are up at the top of their conferences, do you really want to disrupt chemistry and say, okay, we've got to break things up and make room for Jerome McGinley now, or make room for Shane Doan now? Because, you can't really just bury those guys in your fourth line and say, we don't want to disrupt the chemistry of our top 2-3 lines. So, kind of confusing. Another one that's interesting for me, does Luongo finally get moved?
I don't know. Luongo's a tough decision. I mean, look at Vancouver. I mean, they're other than Minnesota, they were kind of favorites to win that division again. They always kind of had been. I don't think I actually picked them to win the division at the beginning of the year. But anyway, they're there. I mean, they're a team that's there. They're sitting in third. They're leading their division. So Luongo, it's tough. I mean, because what team's really going to want him now? I mean, look at Toronto. Do the Leafs want him? I mean, Scrivens has played very well. Reimer's back now. So, I mean, Toronto, I don't know if Toronto is willing to dump some players to pick up Luongo. So I think there might be an out. You look at Florida. Florida, I mean, with one of the weak divisions, they've been up and down. Them and Tampa in the 3 seeds. So
Yeah, maybe
you
Tampa
never know. You
would
can
need a
see
goalie.
that.
Tampa could use
Tampa,
a
I
goalie.
mean, Lindback was supposed to be their guy, and he's kind of blown it this year, really.
Yeah, another guy that kind of interests me would be Jonathan Bernier. Had a little bit of a rough outing last night. Got pulled against St. Louis, gave up 4. They came back when they put Quick in there. But I would argue that Bernier is a legitimate starting in goaltender in the NHL, the same way that Schneider is. He just kind of buried behind a guy that you don't really outplay John Quick, who was the best goalie in the NHL last year for anyone's money. But does Bernier get moved, or does LA say we like what we have? Do they kind of take the Vancouver route where, if Quick falters, they have that confidence in Bernier that he can be that guy the same way as Vancouver's done with Schneider? Kind of difficult to say. I mean, I could see goaltending being kind of the hot commodity this year come playoff time, or come trade deadline time, sorry, because there are so many teams, as you said, that are kind of lacking goaltending. Florida, Tampa, Edmonton even. Dubnyk has been decent, up and down young guy. They want to go with him, but I don't know. I would say goaltending, if anything. I don't think there's a lot of players that need to toss around too much this deadline.
Yeah, goaltending's kind of been a letdown. I mean, looking at our picks, I mean, goaltending's kind of let us down a few times in our picks.
Yep.
Both of us not the best weeks this week.
I'm
Matt a little bit dropped
disappointed.
before than I did, but we're both under 500, so not looking too great. But we'll be right back with the pick section. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. Welcome back to Hockey Talk. As far as picks go last week, both of us under 500. Not at the best records. I know I was 3-4. Matt was 2-5. So Matt, what things maybe went wrong last week and we didn't get the records we wanted?
Well, as I said, I was kind of on my high horse a couple weeks ago, and seems like I've been knocked down from there. I'm ashamed. I think we're going to start a new segment where whoever does worse in the week has to wear this for the first minute of this pick segment. I was a real horses you-know-what with my last picks, but this week I think I'm going to do a little bit better.
I think we were let down though. I mean, we picked the better teams and we just got let down a few times, I think.
It's really hot in here, so I'm just
We
going to...
both picked against Chicago last week.
I'm going to take this off for a second to do these picks.
Whew. So as far as total records go, what do we got now to this point?
Well, right now, after my 2-5 week last week, I've slipped back down to 21-25, and your 3-4 brings you up to a total of
Not too
25-21.
bad as well,
so 21-25, 25-21. Overall, we're 500. We're dead even.
500, yeah.
That was the goal, to kind of stick around 500. So going this week, looks like tonight's game, Wednesday, we're going to go with Ottawa versus Toronto. Battle of Ontario in Toronto.
It's in Toronto.
Yep.
Ottawa's played well. They had won about 5 straight before. They've dropped one now. I mean, it's tough to say. I don't think Anderson's back in the lineup. So just on that basis, I think
No,
Toronto.
Ben Bishop tonight.
Ben Bishop's in net. I think Toronto dropped their last game, didn't they?
Toronto beat New Jersey on Monday.
Toronto beat New Jersey, so I'm going with the Leafs.
Okay.
I'm going to take the Leafs on home ice. I think I've picked the Leafs a few times this year, and they haven't let me down. So I'll go with the Leafs.
Yeah, I'm a Toronto fan, so I'm going to pick Toronto based simply on that. I don't really have to make too much of an explanation.
It's like Paul and the Jets.
They lost to Ottawa. They kind of blew the last one they played against Ottawa. And it's not so much the same ebbs and flows that you see with Montreal, but generally it is fairly even with Toronto and Ottawa, except if it comes to playoffs, because Toronto always wins. But if that last loss was a little bit disappointing, I think Toronto will be hungry and they're going to come out and they'll get it done tonight.
So that's tonight. What about what we got for tomorrow?
Tomorrow night we got a Edmonton versus Detroit. Kind of the young, the new school of the West versus the old school of the West. Detroit's played well. Edmonton not as well as we thought, but should still be a good game.
That's a tough game. I mean, Detroit's obviously the better team to this point this year. They gave Chicago a great run on the weekend, just about beating them. So, I mean, other than that, I think I'm going to go with the wild card. I got to go with the gut feeling. I got to go with the Oilers, the young Oilers. It's tough to say. I mean, they're kind of floating around. They're sitting just out of the playoffs, I believe. But I think I'm going to take the Oilers on this one.
Okay, again, terrible luck when I pick against you, but I think I'm going to go with Edmonton this time. I think right about now, I feel like this is the point when Edmonton is really going to start peaking.
If they peak
I
at
feel
all,
like
it'll be now,
I feel like
yeah.
if it's going to happen, it's got to happen now. This is when they're going to make their push. Detroit's kind of sitting comfortable in a pretty good position right now, and I think this is when Edmonton's really going to start turning it on. I think that they're going to be the team that beats or ends the Blackhawks streak. They play them on Sunday coming up this week. I think if anyone's going to do it, I think they're the team that can do it. I think that this right now, this week, is going to be when they really start to take off.
All right, so we both got the same picks so far. What do we got for Friday night?
We have Minnesota against Anaheim. Anaheim up in the top of the West. No, we don't. I'm sorry. That's last week's I'm looking at. Chicago versus Colorado. In Colorado.
Okay, Colorado or Chicago still got their streak. So if you think that you're obviously going to go with Chicago, if you think Edmonton's going to knock them off on Sunday, so I don't know. I think Colorado's going to knock them off. I'm going to take Colorado wild card Friday night.
They're playing tonight as well.
They
so
could
we'll
beat them
see.
in. They could beat them in overtime too. So I mean, if Colorado drops tonight, I think maybe they'll come out. Maybe they'll beat them in overtime or something on Friday.
In Colorado, who knows, right? Things could happen. I'm going to go with Chicago, as I said. I think Edmonton's going to be the one that ends it. So I'm going to go with Chicago in that game. We're looking at, what are we at now? Saturday?
Saturday, yeah.
Saturday we have St. Louis against San Jose in the Shark Tank.
That's a tough game too. I mean, San Jose, they started off great. They've kind of slipped towards the last little bit, but I think I'm going to go with the Sharks at home in the Shark Tank. St. Louis, if they're going to bounce back, it's got to be right now, but I just think San Jose at home Saturday night.
Okay, yep. I'm going to agree with you there. I watched last night's game, actually, San Jose against Vancouver. San Jose outplayed for the most part of the game, but Niemi held them in. Like what I'm seeing from San Jose, they're kind of getting a little bit more on track, kind of a little bit more consistent. And St. Louis has just been wildly inconsistent. I mean, good, young, talented team, but to blow a 4-1 lead like they did last year, it was against the Stanley Cup champ Kings, but they've just been a little bit too inconsistent. They've had hard times finding the net at times, as opposed to when they started the season and were just filling the net. But I would have to go with San Jose in that one as well.
All right, so we have the same pick that one. What we got for Sunday afternoon?
Some team that our cameraman is a big fan of, I think, the Winnipeg Jets against the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, there's only 2 games on Sunday, so it was a tough choice, but I think the Jets and the Devils, it's in New Jersey, is it?
It is.
It's in New Jersey, so I mean, I hate to do this to you, Paul, but I got to go with the Devils. I mean, they've just looked too well this year. I mean, they've had their games where they've slipped, but the Devils, they've looked great of late, and they're right up there contending for the Eastern Conference. I got to go with the Devils over the Jets on Sunday.
This one's kind of tough for me. I mean, I do like New Jersey as the better team, but from what I've seen from them without Broder back there, because he's hurt right now, I don't know if he's scheduled to be back for that Sunday game.
Hedberg's played well, though.
Hedberg's played all right. He was a little bit sloppy against in his last 2 games, actually. He's been kind of lit up a little bit, but I'm going to go with Winnipeg. I think that this is a game that they can win, and they should win.
All right, so then what do we have for Monday?
Monday, we got another Western Conference game. Calgary is going to LA.
Calgary and LA, well, that's an easy one for me. I just think Calgary, they've slipped. They haven't played too well to this point. I didn't think LA is going to start peaking now right away, being the Cup champs. Maybe kind of do what they did last year and slip their way by and then dominate in the playoffs. So I got to go with LA just on a sheer thinking of LA is just a better team than Calgary.
Okay, just for argument's sake, I'll go with Calgary. Calgary beat Vancouver this week, so right. I mean, it is in LA. It's a tough place to play. It's a tough trip to go down there, but I'm going to go ahead and say Calgary.
So then we've got one more game this week.
One more game. I think this is probably my favorite matchup of all of the picks that we've got here. Boston against Pittsburgh. Teams that you could easily see in the Eastern Conference Final. You could argue they're the 2 best teams in the East. It's in Pittsburgh. Boston's dropped 2 straight as of this point right now. Who knows if they'll get back on track, if they're kind of faltering right now, if they're showing a little bit of weakness. Pittsburgh's been pretty consistent all the way through.
So who are you taking in this one?
I got to go with Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. I mean, they haven't been able to keep anybody off the score sheet, but who can argue with their offense, right? What was it last Saturday? 7-6 over Montreal. They can't keep anybody out of their net, but with the offense that they have and their firepower, Malkin is back again now, even after being injured, so I'm going to have to say Pittsburgh. I think Boston might be able to keep pace with them. As much as they play kind of like a muck and grind, try to slow you down, physical, take you out of your game, I think Boston will be able to keep pace, and I could see this being, a 5-4 game where Pittsburgh comes out the victor, maybe even an OT.
Yeah, I think I'll take Boston in this one. Boston, they've played well, obviously, being up where they are. I mean, challenging with Montreal for that division, but they do have a few games at hand. I think physically, they're just a big team. I mean, goaltending for Pittsburgh just hasn't looked strong. Like you mentioned, that 7-6 game, whether it's Vaughn or Fleury, neither of them have played great as of late. It is still a week in advance, so it is tough to call. But on that goaltending alone, just goaltending, Tuukka Rask is one of the best goaltenders in the league. So just on that, I got to go with Boston. It's a tough game, like you mentioned. It's definitely one of the best ones of the week, yeah. So I'll take Boston in that one.
All right, so we've got, we're agreeing on what looks like 3 games alone.
3 games, good. So
we can have a big fluctuation this week. We'll see.
We'll get some decent records, and then I guess that pretty much wraps it up. So we'll be back next week. My name is Jaret Schneider, along with Matt Durnan. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. Thanks for watching.